Hi, I'm San Diego family law attorney Brian A. Victor, and welcome to my 15th podcast episode. Now, I continue to mention in my podcast episodes the listenership has increased with each podcast I record. I can't believe the amount of followers I've had and how many of you have listened to these podcast episodes, and I'm very grateful because I record them in order to help you understand some very complex family law issues that may be going on in your own lives. Now, as a reminder, if you're not a current subscriber to my podcast, please make sure you go to the iTunes store and subscribe so you don't miss any important podcasts regarding child custody and divorce issues. Also, please remember to go to my YouTube page and you can listen to any prior episodes you may have missed. And also, you can re-listen to podcast episodes focusing on a particular topic of interest. Now, for this podcast episode, I'm going to continue discussing what needs to be considered when creating a child custody plan. As I discussed in my last podcast episode, there are many things to consider when developing a child custody plan. For instance, I talked about understanding what works in a child custody plan versus what might need to be modified. And I also discussed that the court does not always want to modify an entire child custody plan. For this podcast, I'm going to continue this conversation and I'm going to change focus, this time focusing on work schedules and how they impact a child custody plan. Again, I speak from my nearly 12 years of experience having worked at family court services and from my experience as a child custody attorney here in San Diego. It is extremely important to take into consideration both parties' work schedules as it relates to when they are available to spend time with their child. For example, if one parent works during the day, then clearly that would not be a logical time to ask the court to have the child in their custody. The flip side, of course, is that if the parent works at night and then asks for the child to be with them during that time, that also may not be an appropriate time to add into the child custody plan. There are many ways to work around one's work schedule to allow for a child to be in that parent's care. The important thing to remember, however, is that when a child is with that parent, it is the parent's main responsibility to care for the child at that time rather than work during that time, especially when parents have younger children who need more supervision. If both parents work and have the same work schedules, then it may be appropriate for them to work together to try to figure out what daycare will be used for caring for their young children, especially if they're not school-aged. For parents of school-aged children, it is important to work together to figure out the daycare provider for caring for the children after school and during school holidays. The final area I want to talk about regarding the child custody plan is being aware when a parent may be a danger to the child, necessitating the need for supervised visits. Now, this is a topic that would take its own podcast to discuss. However, when there is a need for supervision, creating a child custody plan becomes more difficult because you need to consider the availability of the court-appointed supervisor. Suffice to say, this is one more aspect that makes the creation of a child custody plan more difficult. There is too much information regarding developing a child custody plan than can be described in 2 podcast episodes. And have no fear, I will discuss more aspects of it in future podcasts. The important thing to remember is that the creation of a child custody plan can be difficult, but with the right insights, it does not have to be impossible. To inquire further about your family law matter, look for a local family law attorney who can discuss this process as it relates to your specific situation. In San Diego, California, contact the law offices of Brian A. Victor for more information on your specific family law situation. Thank you very much for listening to this 15th podcast episode, as well as my previous episodes. And feel free to contact me at my website at www.brianvictorlaw.com for any suggestions you have regarding topics for future podcast episodes.